So today we're going to be talking all about Chili Piper Fire, which is our new UI. So most people, you started on Chili Piper Legacy, and then we're moving everyone over to the new UI. So today you're joined by Jonathan, who is our principal CSM and my go-to for all things Chili Piper. He's a Chili Piper genius. He will never tell you that, but I think it's true. And then also me, I'm much smaller since I'm less important, but I'm product marketing here at Chili Piper. All right, so today we're going to be chatting about if you haven't migrated yet, what to expect, and then we'll be going through some of the things that are new and cool in Chili Piper Fire. So Flow Builder, what reusable assets are and how they compare to the queues in Legacy, how the new reporting and troubleshooting works in Fire, our new matching hub, and a disclaimer, the matching hub is just for folks on Salesforce CRM, but everything else is relevant for folks on HubSpot on Salesforce. And then we'll finish up with questions. So please do put as many questions in the chat or the Q&A as you can, and we'll answer as many as possible. We'll also be sending out a recording, a recap article, and answers to all of the questions to everyone who registered for the webinar. So great. So before we kick things off, I just want to do a quick poll. Let me go ahead and launch our poll. So who has upgraded to Fire already? Yes, no, in progress. Okay, looks like most of you have. It's kind of like a mix. Most have already upgraded, some not yet, and then some are also in progress. Cool, that's great to see. So this is relevant for everyone. So if you have already migrated, it'll be great to see kind of what you can do right now. And yeah, it's great for it'll be relevant for everyone. Cool. So before we get into it, I just want to quickly touch on why we decided to build an entirely new platform. So we saw this issue in the routing and scheduling and chat space where everyone was managing rules and teams and like all of their routing and meeting types and separate tools. So you might have like some people in Calendly, some people in Chili Piper. You might have some routing rules in Lean Data, some in Chili Piper, some in like a Drift or a Qualified. And you're updating these constantly. Like maybe sales decides to redo their territory, so you have to make those updates in Lean Data and then in Chili Piper and then in Qualified, and you have to do it over and over again. And even within Chili Piper, if you had separate queues for things and you wanted to change your routing rules, you'd have to update it in each different queue. But with our new system, it's all consolidated. So instead of making the one update the same time across multiple queues, you can make it once in one rule and it's cascaded across everything. When Jonathan does his demonstration, that'll make a little bit more sense to see how it works in the tool. Also, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jonathan.
All right. So yeah, it looks like the majority have upgraded. So we weren't going to spend too much time on this bit anyway, but for those that haven't, if you jump to the next slide, just a quick recap. There's a couple of key points. One, all of your assets will be migrated. We'll do the heavy lifting, and we'll show you. I've got an example of things will look like, but then some top tips and best practices how you might want to change that for the better with the new functionality that the new platform unlocks. Any Chili Piper links, so that's a concierge via JavaScript, router links out there via email campaigns, queue links, personal links, they can be migrated with a flick of a switch to their new equivalents on the platform. There may be some cases where you're doing sort of a phased approach. You know, I'm sure you already discussed or in discussions with your CSM around that, but ultimately we can migrate or redirect those links. We do recommend that you update all of your links in any cadences, sequences, campaigns that go out, you know, because to have those up-to-date, most recent links in there, but at the very least, it buys you some time, you know, where you get that switch between old and new. And then from an end user perspective, they will need, this is the key bit for the end users, they have to reconnect Outlook and Google. As admins, you'll have possibly already noticed that we've migrated your Salesforce connection. Those on HubSpot, you do need to connect. But from an end user perspective, you know, whether it's testing or, you know, going live, you need to get the users connected, obviously for the calendars to populate. We couldn't migrate those across. The other part is being comfortable with the platform. That's kind of like the fourth step on what this call is all about. So yeah, let's move on. Cool. I think I'm going to share at this point. So bear with me. I'm just going to maneuver these around. So what we're going to start off with, we're not going to start off with the admin center. We will kick off with Flow Builder, and we're going to use a concierge router to begin. And I'll talk through the differences. Appreciate not everybody's using Concierge, but I think it's kind of covers and gives you the framework of what Flow Builder is, and I'll cover some differences in a moment. So this is a Concierge router, and it has what would have typically been four different tabs on the old system. So you'd have your inbound router settings, you'd have your queue settings. If you wanted to go and check on your CRM actions, you'd have to open it up sequentially through different tabs. And what we've got here is the whole router. Common ground across all of the products is they'll all have a trigger. So for Concierge, the trigger is the form submission or an in-app implementation, a little bit more custom, or a router link that's being shared, for example, in a HubSpot or a Pardot or Marketo campaign. So Gone is the separate form asset, and now you configure the form mapping directly within the router itself. But it gives you one of the common questions is, well, why have you got separate ones for in-app and separate triggers for the links? It's because you might want to map the fields differently and show different fields depending on, even though it's the same router, you've got different sources of this traffic, and therefore you might want to collect slightly different information. So that's why you'll notice when you migrate, you'll have three options there automatically enabled. Core one, of course, being a web form being submitted. And this is where you do that mapping. We'll talk about data fields as we go through different points, but these are, if I just hover over this now, what you'll notice is that we map fields to the lead or contact in Salesforce or to the contact and company in HubSpot centrally once. So you don't have to repeat yourself over and over again. We want to turn that on. Cool. So that's the common ground on all of them. And then in the products, you'll always have routing rules. That's another common theme. I'll talk about the rules and how they compare to queues in a moment. And then from then on in, you will get slightly different actions depending on the product. So in Concierge, we're going to display a calendar. That is the outcome that we're looking for, allow someone to book a meeting. And then you've got various actions like update ownership, create event. A lot of these, there are commonalities, send notifications. But like I said, there'll be some product specific differences. Just to quickly cover handoff. Again, this covers obviously both CRMs. The trigger is the prospect being selected. So this is you hitting the Chili Piper icon in Salesforce or HubSpot or Gmail or Outlook to launch Chili Piper and then go into handoff mode if you have a handoff license. So that's probably the easiest trigger of them all, arguably. And again, you have your rules. So your different routing rules. We're still going to display a calendar within the scheduler, and then we'll create event, update owner, so on and so forth. So very, very similar. For those of you that already use distro, you'd be very familiar with this. So we're not going to spend too much time. Distros are Salesforce specific or Salesforce only lead or any object for that routing tool. The trigger for that is record updates. And again, you see this pattern. And yeah, the idea is you'll start to feel already is that you can reuse these. So these rules could be used across multiple routers, multiple products. The teams can be reused, and we'll give you some better examples of that in a moment. Madeline, if I do need to stop, if there's any questions, I see the chat pinging away, but just stop me if you feel it appropriate based on what you know that is in the, obviously the schedule and what's coming through on the chat. Alrighty, so Flow Builder. That's a sort of an overview of the different actions. Let's start to jump in the rules. So I'm going to jump into a routing rule first. I'm going to cover ownership. I'm going to come back to this routing rule, this disqualification one in a moment. So the rules still have two different algorithms as they did in the previous platform. You have ownership, you have round robin. With ownership now, you specify a team within the rule, and this will largely look the same. An error on my part there. You can't have account and contact and lead, of course. But this is now where you pick the object, very similar. You pick the field, and for ownership, it has this is in team operator, which of course isn't an operator you would expect, like equals, there's not equals. And what you're doing here is telling Chili Piper, go and check to make sure, and this applies to HubSpot equally, does the owner of this account exist in this team? So just like you would create a team within a queue in your platform, same applies. It's just moving it into a slightly different location. And that's a common theme throughout. And my customers on this call will have heard me say this multiple times. Functionally, it's the same. Concierge, submit a form, calendar appears, you book a meeting, you update the CRM. We've just moved things around. And hopefully we can bring to life some top tips and best practices and why we've done that with the platform approach. So this is just saying, like I said, to recap, go and check to see if one of these account executives is either the account owner, and why I've split this out into three. This is one of those kind of sort of new additions. When you reference the account object directly, as per the tooltip, this is where we're looking at net new records. I really want to cover this to make sure you get off to the right start with the ownership rules. Account object on its own is a net new record. We don't know whether it's going to be a lead or a contact at this point. Maybe you're connected to HubSpot, reliant upon a HubSpot or a Pardot or a Marketo, creating that record on your behalf. So in this case, this accounts for net new records. Go and do and check for the account owner, and we'll cover the matching hub shortly. This is for existing contacts. So we're explicit now in the rules. This is where the contact exists. Go and check the account. And this is a new one for existing leads that already exist in Hubs in Salesforce, but have yet to be converted. Go and check the matched account. So these two operate very similar. This is for net new. This is for existing leads, and contact account is kind of something we've always done. But all three, it may look complex. This is ultimately looking at the account owner rule, but there's a good reason for it. We've got different entry points now, different starting objects before we check them. So I just wanted to make sure we've covered that. And then once we've,
Danielle,
yeah, sure.
Danielle asked, there's a lot of times where if there's a field matches against person instead of lead or contact, and she's trying to figure out if that's happening because she has it set up incorrectly or why that might be happening.
I'm going to cover person on the next rule.
Okay,
We'll look at that. Yeah. And I'll talk about the order of that. That's probably worth mentioning here. We check these top to bottom. Now, you shouldn't have an overlap here, but that'll become really important when I show you the next rule. And talk about how the person field interacts with the other objects. Looking at display calendar, because this is an ownership rule, rather than try to pick a round robin or an individual, it defaults to the owner. So it's just going to dynamically go and show the availability based on Scott or Richard or Faisal. A couple of things to mention in here. You set the meeting type. So previously the meeting type was done within the queue. You do it all here. You can add additional invitees. So we've done away with the default booker concept, but you can now add as many additional users as you want, and you can set them as required or optional. So I just want to mention that. We can notify people. So for any admins on this call that were default bookers, you would have received an email for every single meeting that you received previously. That has gone away. So if you're wondering why your inbox is quiet, it's not because the meetings are not being booked, it's because you're not being notified. And that's a conscious decision, for better or worse, depending on who you speak to. But we've added it back in. So now you can notify yourself or anybody that's in the workspace here. And then the last part of this display calendar is the time elapsed. So in the concierge router previously, you had the queues for prospects who didn't take action. I know it's a mouthful. The default time of that was 10 minutes. And what that would do is run a second route, essentially, with a set of queues. You now set the timer here. And then this is where you branch off. So if I've booked a meeting, I'm going to take these actions. If I've not booked a meeting, I'm going to take these actions. And I'll bring it to life in the next rule. Hopefully, these are all pretty self-explanatory. Couple of additions. You can now update the account owner or the company owner directly, whether it's Salesforce or HubSpot, which you could never do before. So I can go in and update not only the object owner, but any lookup field on that object as well. No longer reliant upon Salesforce flows or HubSpot workflows to go and update those relevant fields. And the same applies to update field. This is new, and any related object that you can pick, you can go in and update, for example, the status to sales accepted because you've booked a meeting. So the update field node is brand new, and you can go and make the distinction between different objects and related objects when you are doing that. Let's take a look at the second one. I just want to cover a round robin, and I'll talk about the person fields. So this is a typical rule, and you'll find that your rules have been split into this fashion. So if I take what would have been lead or contact, country equals United Kingdom on the previous system, pretty standard rule. I imagine you've all got a variation on this, country or company size. Everything had to be built in the Salesforce or HubSpot object fashion to build those rules, whether it was a net new record or an existing record. When you get migrated, You might want to change this. We will have split that out into person, net new, or if it, at least what is the most recent form submission value, existing lead country, or existing contact country. And the order of this, it matters. So if the value on the form is different to the value on the lead or the contact, if this rule appears at the top of the router and the person field is at the top, we're going to match to that first. That might explain any discrepancies between form submission and CRM values. You've got to think about how you construct the rules. Madeline, so does that kind of answer the question? It was why would something match to a person or via a lead? I haven't got the chat open, not with that many icons, 35 icons. I get lost. I get distracted. I know I will try to answer them all, but we'll leave time for that. But this is a new concept. So the person is anything we collect via the form. It could be a scheduling link. It could be our chat product. But this now allows you to just hone in on the form submission. So countless times during kickoffs with existing customers, I would have been asked or told, I don't care about the lead or the contact. I don't care. Like, I just want you to route based on the form submission, which could get quite confusing before. You had to worry about whether Chili Piper was creating the record or not and all of this. A lot of you may choose to simply delete the lead or the contact rules entirely. And now you are telling Chili Piper explicitly route based on the form submission. I don't care about the lead or the contact. Lead or contact, you could still use it for different things like status, for maybe post-sale use cases. But I'd say for the vast majority of customers, you could simplify your rules. Now, we had to make a decision. We had to copy the rules to make sure that they were cross-compatible with what was actually going on here and what you might want to do. You know, if you just want to hit the ground running and continue to use Concierge without making any, or any of the products for that matter, without making any changes. But yeah, I've got a lot of customers who have switched to this just to simplify things.
So Daniel asked as a follow-up question, should person
Yeah.
be first in the hierarchy, or should we try to match on lead to contact first?
Personal preference. Yeah. And you got them, and it's the order within the structure as well. So if you really wanted to check the CRM first for everything, you would technically lead separate rules. You have all of your Salesforce rules followed by all of your person rules. I think that make a router incredibly busy, but it's possible now. It's possible in a way that it just wasn't possible before, where you could prioritize in that fashion.
And Jacob asked, in this flow, does booking status field automatically update, or is that something you need to add?
So we talk a lot about explicit rules and explicit CRM actions. That is the one thing that happens regardless. So we've got booking status, booked, not booked, and there's a new one, disqualified. So, and I'll talk about disqualified in a sec. HubSpot customers, you'll be familiar with disqualified. That's been, obviously, it came along after the Salesforce integration. But for everyone now, you do not need to tell Chili Piper to update the booking status, the meeting type, or any of the custom fields on the event. They will continue to happen as long as you have those fields or those properties on the object. It's just for everything else that you want to take place. Any other relevant questions before I just cover the round robin and we'll jump into distributions?
Let me read out Cody's. He says, updating ownership is great. One thing we've run into is that the event is created automatically associated with the contact, but it isn't automatically associated to the account. In this instance, in Fire, would the account ownership update process fail?
If you book with a contact and you want to update the account owner, the fact that the event is related to the contact should have no bearing. It should be isolated.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've answered that. I think I've got the crux of that.
Okay, so it's the event is created automatically associated with the contact, and it should be associated to the account because the contact is associated to the account.
Yeah. And that's the default option.
Question, I'm not sure if I fully understand. We fully understand. We're having
we can look back.
Okay, yeah, we can always look back. Okay, Lisa, she says that she's having issues with the updating CP bucket status in Salesforce, not updating. It was working in Legacy, but not in Fire.
Raise a ticket with support immediately, and or you loop in your CSM if applicable. Yeah, no reason why that shouldn't be happening. We haven't changed anything regarding the the Salesforce integration itself and permissions or anything like that shouldn't be any different. So I'm going to continue with the display calendar. I showed you the ownership. The default option for non-ownership rule is a round robin, and I'm going to jump into the distributions because that's a core sort of change that we wanted to cover. But this is your round robin, my United Kingdom meeting pool with a couple of reps, and then the rest of it's pretty similar. There's one difference between the ownership and the non-ownership is on legacy you had the queues for prospects who didn't take action. That was done sort of, you had all of your scheduling queues and all of your non-scheduling queues. You do that on a path by path basis now. So you can come in here and you have a separate round robin for those that did not book. That always existed on your platform. You just couldn't see it. It was a black box. Again, I'll go into that in more detail in a moment, but I just want to make sure, just highlight what this assigned to is doing, because it's kind of happened here, but then why is it happening here? This is where you do assign to and you do another update ownership node. I'm going to leave it off for now, but that's where you handle that. The other thing that I mentioned, I've mentioned a couple of times, and we've talked about the booking status, is this disqualification rule. So a lot of you, because of the way the old platform worked, you disqualified by the absence of a rule. So you would often have lead status does not equals, account status does not equals, and you'd have to kind of exclude those. And then at the bottom of the router, you by not matching one of those rules, you were disqualified by default, and then therefore you could redirect and do whatever you wanted to do. You can now put rules wherever you want. So I can actually drag these around. You can duplicate the paths. But what I recommend is just considering your rules. And where you have those kind of does not equals, classic one is email. So for every single queue, you'd have to go in and do lead email contains none of, lead job title contains none of. Flip it on its head. Flip it on its head, create a disqualification rule. Person email contains any of, positive match, Gmail, Yahoo. Your person job title contains students, but you're like normally the first one to go. And have the positive match to those rules. And then rather than have a display calendar, you simply have a redirector form. And that's a disqualification. That's an example of a disqualification rule. And you can have different types of those. Account status equals customer is another good example that a lot of customers are now deploying through the Fire platform. I chose back to form. Back to form means do nothing. It means drop the form and kind of, end the journey there. However, you can specify URL. So if it's account status equals customer, you send them to a page that acknowledges they're a customer, and they should probably reach out to the account manager. And the eagle-eyed amongst you would also note that you can include form values. So you could pre-fill a sign-in form, for argument's sake, as part of this process. So some things to think about. But yeah, this addition now, this ability to positively match means you could potentially, for anyone that has sat there and updated an exclusion list of personal emails or job titles or countries, bundle them all up into one or multiple disqualification rules at the top of the router. And then you get to keep your country rules or your company size rules a lot cleaner, much, much easier to manage. You might not want to do this on day one if you've migrated today, but it's something for you to consider, in your own time or with your CSM. How can you make the router more efficient? We couldn't do that on your behalf, of course. Any questions before? Did you think that I should pause on before I jump into teams and distributions, Madeline?
I think you can go. Someone asked if there's search capability within the concierge routers flow page. So you can just show quickly how you can search for routers. I think
in here?
Yeah, I think so.
So I will mention it because it's something that's come up internally, externally. This is a very simple router, granted. When you've got 50 paths, you can quickly search around, and you can kind of quickly navigate around top to bottom. Right now, there's not, but it is a feature request. We can maybe try to find that, share it. No, but there's a feature request. Certainly, I've seen internal discussions where you could hit Control F, obviously a dedicated search box, and just show me my, and go straightly to the rule. Salesforce does something very similar where you can, you're looking at the object, go straight to it. Otherwise, if we're talking routers, this is my router list from before, and you can search, if you've got lots of routers, you can do that. It possibly with this one, but let us know in the chat if that clarifies or not.
Yeah, let us know, Sarah. Kelly asked if we can use the disqualification rule to block individual prospects.
If you know their email, yes. Yeah. It
That
starts with contains, theoretically, yes. If you can build it, then there's that. I'm not sure if that answers. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, it can. You could be email equals X.
Mhm.
We
And
can
then
do that.
Dan asked if the flows will be pre-built with a migration or if we need to recreate them in Fire.
Yours will be pre-built.
Yeah.
Yours will be pre-built, but with those caveats, so that like the example I shared of the rule, which I've now deleted, there may be, depending on what objects you had before, it'll turn what is a two-line rule, and that's exponential, right? So you could have lead contact country, lead contact company size. Every single one of those will be duplicated, and the person field, if it exists on the form, will be added. So yes, sorry, kind of like took that for granted. Your inbound routers as they exist today will be turned into this format. They'll be turned into this format. Yeah. This is more around now, how can we make those tweaks? And that was one of the most common questions, like best practices, top tips. Great, we've got this new router, but how can I take advantage of it? How can I use, those reusable assets and some things that I'll show you in a sec. But no, whether it's a concierge router or a handoff router, we will have pre-built everything for you.
Cam, to answer your question, the way we do it at Chili Piper is we have an events landing page with our forum booker that has like the UTMs to show that the meeting was coming from an event. But there's different ways that you can do it, Jonathan. Cam just asked tips for
Yeah.
using concierge at events.
Uh,
Native Chili forums are our own landing page. That's what he said.
I've done a lot pre-event and at the event. Drop us a line. It's a webinar in itself. we are working on a case study for a pretty expansive events use case, but work in progress. But yeah,
So booking meetings at the event is a little more straightforward. Jonathan, do you want to just like if you're at an event and you're booking meetings with sales reps for after the event?
I've seen either a dedicated landing page, just drop a router behind it, so it looks a bit more branded. It looks a bit more, professional, dare I say. Alternatively, you could just use the router link, quick and dirty method. Yeah, you fire up a laptop or an iPad or a phone with the router link on it. You obviously add first name, last name, email. And if you want your router to follow typically customers want the router at an event to follow the same pattern as the website, because you don't have to worry about in-person logistics. It's purely, let's book a Zoom or a Google Meet or a Teams meeting for 3 weeks time, 2 weeks time. Then yeah, either copy of your existing router or use a router link. You can put like a picture on this and stuff as I'll dress it up a bit. But yeah, in person for post event is the easier of the two for sure.
I'll drop a link of an article that we wrote about how we do it at Chili Piper, like how we use Chili Piper, if it's helpful.
Yeah. Right, let's cover teams and distributions. I think that's probably the bit I probably spend most time with customers, just to kind of explain what we've done. So previously in the queue, you had your algorithms. We talked about round robin or ownership. You've got your people and your waiting and the rule. So as you've already seen, the rule has been ripped out. That's a separate asset. The team and the algorithm are kind of separate. So let's bring it to life. So this United Kingdom round robin has a distribution. And it's got a United Kingdom for meetings and there's a United Kingdom for records, those that did not book. Like I said, always been there. You just didn't know it. Well, you did know it, but you couldn't report on it. So where you may have had 30 queues previously, you may now possibly have 60, depending on how many of those were used in the queues for prospects who did not take action. So don't be alarmed. Like, whoa, where did all these queues come from? I didn't create all of these. That is the logic why. But what a lot of you will find, I've got my United Kingdom meeting. You will have, when you go into your teams, some of you may find teams with like multiple kind of names in them. And what we've actually done is where there were common groups of individuals. So in the old platform, Jonathan and Aaron were in the United Kingdom queue. They were in the United States queue, etc., etc. Where we found common groupings, we've pushed them into one team. It's like, hey, Aaron and Jonathan were like they're clearly reused over and over. And that would mean if there was a United Kingdom queue and a United States queue with the two people in them, we've created one team, but multiple distributions. So I've got my United Kingdom distributions and my United States distributions, but they're made up of the same people. So don't be alarmed. This was a conscious thing. You might want to split them out. And you might think, well, why have you done that? I used to be able to go into a queue and I could just make changes. But the benefit for this, and I'm yet to find a customer that didn't have at least one bit of overlap, but I might be proved wrong tonight. What it means now is if I want to update my United States queue or distribution, got to use the new terms, and my United Kingdom, if I get a new starter and I want to drop Tom in, Tom's not in this workspace, that's a bad example. If I want to drop Alan in, I can just add Alan to the team. And by adding Alan to the team, he will automatically now exist in the round robins. So you can see Alan's just been dropped in. So that's why we've done it. Hopefully you see the use case immediately. Oh yeah, I used to have 4 queues. I had to keep adding the same person in. That's why we've done it. So the team is the team is the people. You have a team can have a one-to-many relationship with distributions. Some of you might only need one, but that's why we did it. That's why we've done it. And what you'll notice is you can still have different weights and different calibrations within the respective ones. So you can still have, if you want to treat United Kingdom as a separate round robin, as I've done here, to the round robin to US and so on and so forth, you can still do that. Whilst I'm in here, let's go back to one of the meetings ones. One of the other new additions to round robins across all of the product set is you can now have a strict round robin, not just a flexible round robin. Some of you have asked for this for a long time. Obviously, Chili Piper on the old platform, we biased availability over fairness. We've now given you the option to move it to strict. So where you have maybe a queue or a distribution with only a handful of people, even with weighting applied, one of those could get busy quite quickly, less calendar availability. The person on a lower weighting can end up with a similar number of meetings. You think, how does that happen? The busier the other one gets on the higher weighting, the less meetings they can take. So it's not the default, but you can now go in and make it strict, which means we would go Jonathan, Aaron, Alan, Jonathan, Aaron, Alan. Bear in mind what impact that could have on conversions, less time slots, but also what impact it could have on time from meeting schedule to meeting sat, because you have less availability and you might have to push those meetings out because, you want to make it fair. So just something to balance, something to be aware of. That's a new option within the distributions. Right, I just need any questions whilst I take stock of where we're at.
I think we're all caught up on questions unless in the next 5 seconds. Okay. For handoffs, say BDR to AAE. Is there a way to hide the queue from view?
Sorry, can you repeat it? I haven't got the second bit.
For handoffs, say BDR to AE. Is there a way to hide the queue from view? Oh, so like
yes. Yeah. So this actually did exist. I don't know if it's going to let me do this. It was a late addition, but there's this option to allow users to book into non-matching queues, which was on by default in the old platform. So that it is recent in the sense it's the last 12 months. And how that works in handoff, you have user controls under the handoff thing sort of section, and it's here. So if I enable it, it will show green paths and red paths. If I disable it, it'll only show the green paths because there could be multiple matching options. That's entirely feasible. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's handoff, user controls, and then that'll hide them entirely.
I think what Cody's asking is if you can hide the people who's next.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So if we're talking hand, when you do flexible, you have this option to, so we've added quite a few little bits here. You can have a flexible round robin used across multiple products, but you can stop their ability from picking other reps, but it'll still show them. So it's limited, but you can still, hey, I'm going to book the meeting with Tom, you're going to invite in a second, but you can see who you're booking with. And some would argue that that's still open to
Yeah, I
being
think it's
gamed.
feature request. I think the handoff team is thinking about like doing it blind, a
It's
blind.
here. It's here. Blind
Ah,
date. Yeah, blind date is here.
July.
So now when you do strict round robin and you prevent cherry picking, you at no point until that invite's gone out, you won't see who you're booking with. So I think that's exactly what you were looking for. That wasn't there just before Christmas, but there's been some incremental little tweaks and improvements straight off the bat. Obviously we've got things planned for the rest of Q1 and Q2, but yeah, prevent cherry picking with strict round robin. I think we'll give you exactly what you were after. And sorry, we need to show handoff some love. But everything I've shown around distributions and rules, it's applicable across all of the products.
Only enabled for strict round robins is what Cody
Sorry?
had. Is it only enabled for strict round robins? Is what?
Yeah, for flexible, you'll still be able to see them. And you might ask, why have a flexible round robin that doesn't allow you to pick any team member? That would be one if you want to use a distribution across concierge and handoff, where you get the flexible nature in concierge, but a slightly more restricted version as far as SDR to account executive handoff goes. So no, have a play around with it. Obviously, different options there between the two. Like I said, do bear in mind whether you're using those in concierge and handoff or just handoff, because that's going to have potentially a big impact. You might want to create separate distributions for two products. And there's something else I want to cover quickly before we leave that topic is queue grouping is still here, or distribution grouping. So if you have groups where the people are not the same, the classic example for this is you've got a team on the West Coast, a team on the East Coast, and a team in the UK, different people in all of them, but there'll be some overlap. You can group distributions and it'll take into consideration, that's a bad example because they're both, the same team, but you can basically load balance across different distributions, even when the same people are not in them. A little bit more advanced, but it is a use case. We had it on the old platform. We brought this in just before Christmas. Any questions, just shout. But yeah, you can still group distributions where the teams are different should you need that. Should we have a look at the logs? I think we should have a quick look at the logs. So meeting dashboard, again, across the product set, meeting dashboard is now sat here under meetings activity. It's pretty similar. A little bit more detail, I would argue, as to what the source of the meeting was. So you've got individual booking link, a round robin, concierge, good spread there of the different types of meeting activity. One thing that you will also have, and I don't know if I've got any cancelled ones, let me open this up. When you cancelled a meeting in the old version, it used to disappear entirely. It used to go off into the ether. So we've now added cancelled as a status, which I'm glad to say. And when you click on them, very similar. You'd be very similar sort of setup where you can go in, look at the status, you can look at the event history, has it been rescheduled, reassigned, cancel it, no show, little ghost there, and you still have the option to reassign. What options you see here will depend on what type of queue or distribution it was booked into. So this is showing everyone in the workspace. If it was booked into a distribution, it'll show you the specific distribution first, obviously to keep things aligned. So yeah, little incremental changes to the meeting activity. And then for concierge, this is a lot better. So once you've drilled down into an individual meeting, so you'll have like your per router, timeline, jump into a specific log, and you will get way more detail than before. So, and hopefully we'll, have a great improvement on self-service. So right-hand side is the form response. As long as it's been mapped, you now get the source. So you can actually see and you can troubleshoot exactly where that meeting came from on your website. Do I need to go and check the form if there's an issue? Here's an example of, one of those, ownership queues, very detailed, checking all of these things. And I can see that actually the only thing that matched was the lead owner. And the lead owner was Nicholas. Therefore, Nicholas was the assignee. Then you can jump down into your different rules. As you can see on this one, I wasn't collecting the employee size. So you're not going to get any data here, but it will tell you. If you've collected the data and it's wrong, it will, it'll give you all of the data points you can compare. So, okay, it didn't reach the SMB because the they selected the option for 1,000 employees. Continuing through the logs, we've kind of combined some of what you used to get in the meeting dashboard with the concierge logs and brought it together. So not only do you see the outcome, but you can see where they were redirected to based on the concierge settings, the fact that we updated the record, lead, contact, who we notified, and any of the other actions. So if you add to campaign, update field, it's going to tell you what we did and when, so you can keep a track on that. The other thing we've added for the concierge customers, again, apologies, handoff users. Previously, if you had two routes in submission in concierge on the old platform, if somebody was to submit your form at 18:45, that would start the process and the 10-minute timer. Most of you've been using the queues for prospects who didn't take action timer. Prospect leaves the form, didn't expect to see a calendar, needs to go and chat with a colleague to look at mutual time slots, and then they go back and they submit the form again at 18:50, 5 minutes later. Previously, that would potentially end up with two routes: one to the person they booked the meeting with, and then another person, depending on whether or not you had an ownership rule in place in the queues for prospects who didn't take action. But you end up with two notifications, possibly two routes, which is not a good experience. Two AEs or two SDRs arguing over the lead. Now, what we've introduced as of last week, if you have the same prospect across the entire workspace, so across all of the concierge routers, I've got a few, two prospect submissions within that 10 minutes or whatever timeline has been defined in the settings here that we covered earlier, we will cancel the first one. We'll just stop it so that you only get the one route, and hopefully they book the meeting 2 or 3, 5 minutes later. At this moment, it'll continue to say schedule a meeting, but we're going to update the logs very shortly to say submission cancelled, and you'll be able to go in and look at the filters and say status equals. In addition to these ones, you'll be able to see scheduling skipped. So you can clearly see where you've had two submissions in a row. So I wanted to cover that because that's a long time coming and a big improvement. Before we cover the matching hub, which is Salesforce specific, I'm surprised we haven't had any questions, but one of the common ones is, where are the queue links? So if I go and grab company size queue link, you could go and grab that before. Some of you might have shared that. Instead of a router link, you'd share the actual round robin link in an email campaign or what have you. A link isn't, as you can see, the queues don't exist anymore. The teams and the distributions are two separate assets, but you can still grab a link to a round robin. So if we go to our distribution that we had earlier, sorry, I'm jumping around. Head over to distributions, and I've got my United Kingdom meeting round robin. They're all now stored under ChiliCal. So if I go into ChiliCal, there's a lot of test stuff in here, as you can see. Create new link. I can create a one-on-one link for any meeting type. I can create a round robin, which I'll show you in a second. We've got ownership specific for when you pass through the Salesforce ID or the email address, same for HubSpot. And then we've got group links. So as far as the migration goes, if you have used a queue link within the last 90 days, we will have created a round robin link on your behalf. But you might find that not all queues have links in the ChiliCal section. And if you're wondering why there's a discrepancy, it's because you've probably never used it. So if you go to round robin scheduling link, pick whatever meeting type you need, and this is where you can now join the dots. And you can say, this round robin link should be tied to the United Kingdom round robin you watched me update about 20 minutes ago. So that's how it works. That's the equivalent of your queue link, and you can now edit it. So we would edit this to United Kingdom. And that's my United Kingdom round robin link. Good to go when everybody's connected. So should we cover the matching hub, Marlon?
Yeah, let's jump into the matching hub.
Yeah. Do we still have people? We still have 88 participants. Thank you for sticking around.
Yeah, we have 88 people still.
Cool. Right, we're going to jump into the matching hub to finish off. This is Salesforce specific. I'll touch on one thing on HubSpot whilst we're in here at the top. Actually, I'm going to do this in my test environment. I got a real example. So lead to account matching or company to contact company matching in HubSpot, the default algorithm remains the same as always, which is Does this person or lead or contact, we look at the domain in the extension and we go and look then in, I'm going to use Salesforce to keep it simple. We go and look for any existing contacts in Salesforce with that same domain and extension. No change here. This is how it's always been done as far as lead to account matching goes. You then optionally have this secondary like fallback to go and look at the account domain, the website, and we can go and check that as well. So that's how it's always been, and that is there out of the box. It is enabled. That's where it ends with HubSpot. We don't have the means of sort of going deeper than that. So continuing then with Salesforce, we now have this option to do Salesforce duplicate rules. And that can be combined with. So you could find one account with the Chili Piper rules, the Chili Piper algorithm, and you could find another account with the Salesforce duplicate rules. You will need, of course, Salesforce admin rights or assistance potentially. This is one I created earlier. And this is where you can get really detailed. So just to zoom in on this one, with this rule, we're looking at the account name versus fuzzy match on the lead company, or the account phone fuzzy match on the lead phone, or postal or zip code fuzzy match, again, from account to lead. So this is kind of like an all-encompassing. You can create whatever combination you want in Salesforce, and then you drop that back into Chili Piper and tell us to use it. And then this is where you get the kind of like if I turn this off, it's Chili Piper only. If I turn it on, it's Chili Piper and Salesforce. Now, on top of that, there may be filters that you want to apply. So you might want to just rule out any customers full stop. I've got a customer that is only wants to do lead to account for customers. So I've seen different methods. And these filters are applied regardless of how many matches we get. It's a permanent thing. Do I want to consider this a match between this lead and this account? And then beyond that, we have tiebreakers. So the tiebreakers, for those of you that are migrated maybe about a month or so ago, this is a new addition for anybody migrating, in the last week or two and beyond. You now have the option in tiebreakers to compare two fields. So before this was, you could compare before the filters. The tiebreakers were quite limited. So you could only do things like look at the number of children, contacts, etc., or a field on the account itself. This is super useful now. So if I have two accounts, I've got Amazon UK and Amazon France, you can now tell Chili Piper to check first, does the country on the lead match the country on the account? And if I get a match, then I'm going to prioritize that one. If it's Amazon, if the lead says they're from Germany, which doesn't match this, then we'll just revert to whatever other rules that you have below in the filter. So it just follows a funnel method. Does the country match? No. Okay, I'm going to go and pick the account that was created first, or the account that was created last, or whatever other criteria you have. So that's the matching, lead to account matching, arguably the most sort of used. We optionally have duplicate matching for distro. I'm not going to cover this, but kind of same applies. We've got match to opportunity, lead to op, contact to op, match to case, and then custom matching for custom objects. And again, quite recently, lead to lead as well. So pretty useful if you've got a lead in the system that's owned by someone and another lead comes in that appears to be from the same company, we can join the dots. Really important caveat. Only this one works with net new records denoted by the person. Super important. The lead to account works, and that's why you have that person field here and elsewhere in the rules. Match to opportunity, match to case, custom matching, and related lead are for just that. They are existing records in Salesforce, so might not be as powerful for concierge as they are for handoff, distro, chat, where those leads are already existing, or where perhaps you're running a post-sales use case with Chili Piper. I think we can pause there. Yeah. Thank you for those who are still with us.
We've got 5 minutes left, 4 minutes left for questions. There are so many questions. Let me see which ones we can cover. If you have any, okay, let's see. Can you say again the purpose of ownership queues? That was
ownership queues. Yes. Example of an ownership queue. You could do this before and you can do it now. So what it would look like is if you don't want to use a router, but you have Chili Cal or Handoff, any other product, you can create an ownership link, and it allows, if you have had concierge or handoff or chat, you can build your own rule. If you have Chili Cal only, formerly known as Instant Booker, you'll only be able to do account, contact, or lead. You set the rule. You can set a fallback round robin, just in case it doesn't match. And what you would do here is create a smart link. I don't think we've added. Yeah, let's do the HubSpot one. So what this would allow you to do is create a link for a campaign, for example. And when you pop that link, when you send that link out of HubSpot, it normally has a curly brackets without the encoding. It doesn't matter where you send it from, HubSpot, Pardot, the tool will populate the email address in the link itself, i.e. my email. And when I click on that link, it will check for an owner. And in the absence of an owner, it can fall back to a round robin. So that's not new functionality, but it just exists in a slightly different place. And you have to build it independent to the ownership rule that you were used to before. Hopefully that answers the question.
And Zachary said it was mentioned earlier about a disqualified booking status. How is that automatically applied? Is there a specific routing rule needed?
Only if, let's go back into concierge. It's when we don't display a calendar. So the disqualified, there's always been this, even in the old platform, we talked about disqualified. A lot of customers say, well, they're not technically disqualified. I just want to show them a calendar. We mean this. We mean the same thing. Like we've got to pick a description. So disqualified might sound too strong, but what we're saying is any rule where there's no display calendar and instead is a redirect to, that's disqualified, even if you don't agree with the verbiage. Super common. And the same happens down here as well, right? So you've got catch-all where it doesn't meet the rules. You have to have a catch-all. It just closes the loop, make sure that we've got no unattended leads, contacts. But yeah, what I recommend, like I said earlier, catch-all is cool, but having a dedicated rule is probably going to be more useful to a lot of you. Any questions about the APIs?
I didn't see any API questions come through, but we did have some on the form. Do you want
to quickly let me load this up in here? So we had a question regarding APIs and reporting. So in addition to Zapier, which we still have, we now have custom webhooks, which have been, you could technically do this before, but we've got new meetings updated and cancelled meetings. So you can drop webhooks in here. But our APIs have been sort of expanded upon. So we've got the Swagger Doc or Redocly, and we've got some of the similar ones from before where you can add someone to a team, remove them from a team, but we now have reporting. So we've got this beta version meetings and export meetings. One of these, forgive me, one of these returns a CSV. The other one returns JSON, and you can do the same for concierge. So you can export, it's on a week by week basis. Hopefully that's not, it's not great for, but on an ongoing basis, I'd imagine you'd run this as a nightly job or a weekly task to export into like your BI tool. So yeah, new edition, concierge logs in JSON format, 7 days at a time, and then very similar for meetings. And yeah, so you can get those directly. Some of you may have been doing that with an unofficial API before, but it's now there in the app, good to go. Just need to create a token.
Awesome. Great. So we have way more questions than we have time to answer. So I'm so sorry, we're already 1 minute over, but I will be sending out a follow-up email with all the questions and all of the answers, plus the recording and everything. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll catch you later. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all.